What's going on, everyone? I promised myself I'd start the episode in a different hello line, but that didn't happen. We are once again the four united, unqualified film bros with a podcast that's yet to be named. We'll try to get that figured out by next week. I'm George. You guys know me. You guys want to introduce yourselves this week?
I'm Ben. You hopefully know me as well.
I'm Declan. You might know me as well.
And I'm Max, making a glorious return to the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome back. So we teased this at the end of last week. Max is back, so we're going to be talking all about Dune. No, I'm just kidding. That would have been a really terrible way of pulling the rug out from under you guys. We're talking No Time to Die, as you can tell by our dress. The latest entry to the Bond canon, the 25th film, Daniel Craig's fifth and final. We all have a lot of thoughts on this, I know. So
I think we should, at the very beginning here, just give a full spoiler warning to any and all people who haven't yet seen No Time to Die. We're going to talk about all of it.
Yeah, beginning, middle, end. No post-credit scenes, so don't need to worry about that. As much as I waited, I was the only one in the theater to stick it out through the entire credits. Just James Bond will return. James Bond will return. That's a spoiler. But yeah, spoiler warning is in effect. I'll put it in the description for the YouTube video. Let's dive on in. What do you guys think?
All right.
Right.
Well, I feel like we just got to start with our Bond level of Bond fandom, and also whether or not we like the film. I feel like that's the right place to start with this one, given how it's been received generally.
There's a lot going on. I mean, again, it's 25 Bond films, so I've seen all of them, and I think it really does, again, with this reboot with Daniel Craig, they bring a lot of people back the first time in these movies, and so it is, needless to say, you do compare them to the other times they've shown up. So I definitely think that it has an impact. George, you're the newest one here, I think.
Yeah, I'm a newbie here. I had never seen a Bond film before last week, and so I went right into it with Casino Royale, because the three of you so helpful last week with, no, you don't need to see the rest to see No Time to Die. Just watch the Bond era, or the Craig era.
Yeah.
Which was helpful.
It's the only one where it's necessary to see previous films.
Yeah. So I'm given to understand that it doesn't, it's not like other, long running storylines over decades where you have to see everything to see what comes next. Daniel Craig era is the first where it's all one cohesive story.
For better or for worse.
For better, exactly.
It's all like Jack Ryan too. Like Tom Clancy did a similar thing.
Yeah. I started last week with Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, so No Time to Die yesterday. So by the time we post this 2 days ago, definitely. I was saying before we started recording here tonight, I'm hooked on Bond. I'm gonna go watch some Sean Connery, some Pierce Brosnan, my guy George Lazenby.
Hell yeah.
They've Die Another Day for the last one, so you can see the glorious. I think most people voted as the worst movie, worst Bond movie of all time. It's horrendous.
It's certainly up there with Diamonds Are Forever, as
really
long
bad.
as we're not including the unofficial ones.
I feel like I should get those out of the way then.
Yeah. No, you save them for last, so you end on a terrible note.
I don't know. You might want to go full circle, George, and end with the 67, I think it was, spoof version of Casino Royale.
Oh yeah, I was reading about that.
With Woody Allen, Orson Welles,
Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers. Oh man.
If I can recommend to our listeners one YouTube video quickly, look up by the retrospective on the 1967 Casino Royale picture by the YouTuber Haphazard Stuff. It is phenomenal, like simultaneously hilarious, but also not horrifying, but just mind-blowing to see a production go utterly out of control. He does a fantastic job doing the whole story, and it's one you got to see to believe. So I got to recommend Haphazard Stuff.
So as we build our audience and our brand on our channel, Declan pushes you to another YouTuber. So this is the last time we're going to see him on this podcast.
Well,
It's,
you know,
the last
speaking
Daniel
of
Craig film and
chaotic,
last podcast.
speaking of chaotic production, why don't we start with Quantum of Solace? And sort of the era that it was written in. I think it was the writer's strike, if I'm not mistaken, and they were basically filming while the script was being finished. So I think a lot of where the problems arose with that film were with the script and with the development of some characters and the villains and the storyline, and that might be a product of it. And I don't know if it was after Quantum of Solace or if it was after Skyfall, but Daniel Craig is on record having said he'd rather slit his own wrists than do another Bond film, and that caused a whole uproar and huge controversy around those comments. So very interesting to follow.
I will say I don't know this with certainty, so take this with a grain of salt. I think I read somewhere that the quote was taken a bit out of context. Like,
of course it was.
Yeah. I don't want to say with complete certainty. I could genuinely have misheard that, but I thought I read somewhere that it was a bit. It wasn't entirely like he was suffering playing James Bond or anything like that. You know?
Largely, if you look at Daniel Craig, like he's a very unique Bond in that he's taken the longest amount of time to produce the shortest amount of movies compared to everyone else, or the least amount of movies.
Comparatively,
so 5 over like pretty much 15 years.
Yeah.
Most of the, like Roger Moore, I think he did like 7 and 12 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he did a lot of stuff in between, whereas a lot of the other Bonds had taken pretty much they just done all their movies like straight through.
Mm-hmm. Like one or two, like sort of in between, but not
Daniel Craig. Go ahead.
I mean, he was a phenomenal actor, and I think anyone in that position who gets famous from like a Bond movie did a great job with that. You kind of don't want to be that restricted by it, and so I can understand. And I think that actually ties into how Bond ended. I don't know that this was a writing choice. I think it was a Daniel Craig suggestion because he never wanted to be asked back again.
Daniel Craig certainly has had a very, high tier Hollywood career over the last 15 years. And a tease to the end of the episode, we will be ranking our favorite Daniel Craig films. So definitely, I know I personally am going to be looking beyond James Bond. I hope, I know Max, you and I were talking about it before the episode started. So I hope you guys will join me in looking beyond Bond. He's had, Bond is his career defining performance to this point, but he has had some other great roles.
Oh yeah. I would say he's certainly an actor who he is an actor who has not been defined by James Bond. There's nothing wrong with an actor being defined.
He's not a Roger Moore.
It's just he's also managed to have a phenomenal roles that aren't James Bond. It's like and that's a credit to his skills as a performer. I will say.
And I think some of that also has to do with the story that they were trying to drag through the 5 films, right? The production was slower because they were trying to tie it in to the film before. And none of these were meant to be one-offs, and they all ended up tying together at the end of not only No Time to Die, but Spectre as well. Tons of callbacks to previous Craig films in previous Bond films in that movie as well. So I think that space in between production allowed Daniel Craig to branch out and go try out some new franchises, some new genres of film, and I think that's to his own success, but also just a luck of the draw with the writing and the way they produce the films.
I think to your point about the films being interconnected, I think in some cases, like bringing everything together in No Time to Die worked. There was a finality to it. It felt like the end of an era because it was connected to everything he had done before. But in terms of connecting, Casino Royale, the Quantum of Solace, to Skyfall, to Spectre, to No Time to Die, something is lost in my opinion. The last 40 minutes of the 220 runtime of Casino Royale is spent setting up Quantum of Solace.
Yep.
Spectre, the big reveal is that everything that came before was connected. And Ben, you've got a lot of thoughts on that.
That one actually bothered me a lot
both.
because it's clear that they were doing this continuity, but it also seems like they didn't take enough time. Like if you see like a Marvel continuity, they spend a lot of time in the original films, and they tease things that will come up like 5 years later, but they put it in the original films. Whereas the later James Bond films, it really feels like they realized that they left a bunch of dead ends, and they're like, oh, we got to deal with all these. And so it seems like, especially like Felix was gone. I don't remember him in the last two movies. He just shows up and then dies.
Yeah.
It's
can I just say I sort of feel like the connection between the films is almost like half pre-thought, but also half like basically made up on the spot. Like you have like obviously Casino Royale sets up Quantum of Solace, but I also do feel like Quantum of Solace is unique in the sheer level of like being a direct sequel to Casino Royale. Like it is unprecedented among Bond films to be so reliant on the past films. And it's like, okay, so that's an interesting way to do it. I don't think Quantum of Solace worked that well. It's not like I'm not a huge fan of it, but whatever. You did it. He gets his Quantum of Solace at the end. Okay, then you have Skyfall, which I kind of feel like is a bit more of a standalone adventure in a sense. It's very 50th anniversary, so it almost feels a bit cumulative of the entire Bond franchise, and I think that's for the best. I really like Skyfall. Great film. Then Spectre decides to go, you know what? Let's connect everything. Like, I almost don't even, I choose not to accept Spectre as true, even though it's true in Spectre, but I don't think of Skyfall is connected to Spectre because I don't like Spectre. But Spectre makes the twist of, we are just retroactively making everything connected and going from there. And then
that's the vibe I got.
Builds on that, but also does its own thing. So I feel it's an interesting story.
Yeah, it's like they leave things open, but then don't decide what to do with those openings until the next movie.
Yeah.
I knew it was going off. I knew Spectre was going off the rails the moment Mr. White showed up. I was like, oh no, this is not going to end well.
He showed up in all these movies.
Because why? He's a crippled old man living alone in a cabin. There's no reason to bring him back. Like, you've already shot this man in the leg at the end of Casino Royale and he's escaped. Like, okay, fine. Just let him live his life.
But he was also in Quantum of Solace.
Yeah.
No, I know. Yeah.
He's just there. He just pops up. It's like, hey, guys, remember, this is all the same story.
I almost think it could have been more effective, the 5 films, Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace being sort of a prequel and a sequel, and then the last 3 films, if you want to connect them, fine, but they could be their own trilogy. That with the same actors and the same casts, but different through lines, different stories, and that's when you could introduce Blofeld at the end of Skyfall to set up Spectre and have Blofeld be the big bad for the last 2 movies.
Yeah, I mean, again, Spectre,
there's so many ways.
That is the Bond organization, and if you're gonna do a 5 movie and plan it to be a continuity, You can't just have Spectre show up in one movie and be like, oh yeah, here's Blofeld, and then in the next movie you're like, oh yeah, he dies in the beginning, and that's it. Like, it's the most unsatisfying, appearance and like disappearance I've ever seen of a very known, villain.
And also with Christoph Waltz playing the villain too. Like, you got an iconic organization, iconic villain, iconic actor playing a villain, and
it just falls
it's
flat.
a wasted opportunity. Yeah.
And I think it is like some of it is, like I said before, it's because this franchise has been going on for 25 movies for more than 60 years. And so when you rely on those original characters and stuff, of course, anyone that's seen those movies is going to like draw connections, and it falls flat in a lot of ways. They're trying to make a twist, using this old villain, but they stole a twist from Austin Powers, and so it's laughable. It doesn't even make sense. It's like you never get anything about James Bond's backstory until like Skyfall, I guess. And then if they just throw that in there, it's like, oh wait, I remember you. Yeah, we grew up together.
And also again, this has been pointed out, I'm not the first to do it, but he immediately switches from calling him Franz to calling him Blofeld.
Yeah.
And it's like, this doesn't actually make sense. Like, that doesn't make sense, but it's sort of like, the only reason it's special for him to be called Blofeld is because we, as the audience, know he was the main villain in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
For James Bond as a character, if you're going for this stupid twist, which I hate, again, I'm not saying anything new, but having him just call him Blofeld, it doesn't actually. It to me feels like a story made up on the spot, kind of like. How do we make this special, this confrontation? They're brothers.
I think one of the big detriments, especially at the end, and I think part of this comes from Skyfall. Skyfall was a pretty emotional movie. You get to see some James Bond's like backstory and stuff. But in the end, Raul Silva is an original villain. He's written really well, and his plan, it's a revenge plan. It's sort of along the lines of like GoldenEye with Sean Bean's character. They want to take down MI6. It makes sense. It's not really a personal James Bond story, but it brings him in emotionally. And the last two, I feel they struggle a lot because they molded the story around James Bond and not around a villain he needs to, face. James Bond has always been like a tragic hero versus his foil, whatever that foil may be. The foils are so underwritten, it sort of leaves a lot to be desired.
I think what you're saying about, tragic hero against his foil, that was played out literally on the screen in No Time to Die when Rami Malek's character, Safin, says, it's like I'm talking to my reflection, or it's like I'm talking to a mirror.
Well,
yeah, that's the writing.
They were trying to do that. The problem is that he's so underwritten that you don't actually draw those. They have to tell you those.
You get such a great, talented actor in Rami Malek, best known, of course, as Night at the Museum, the Pharaoh
in Night at the Museum.
Yeah. Best known for his Oscar-winning performance in Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury. You get
a robot.
This. Exactly. I was joking with the Night at the Museum thing.
I understand.
But you get this. The point being, you get this iconic actor of the last 5-10 years to play a Bond villain, and you're like, all right, this is gonna be great. And then we were talking about this as I walked out of the theater yesterday. I was talking to you guys. He's just so underwritten. You get that first 10 minutes where it's a flashback to Madeline Swan's childhood, and you're seeing how he will play in to her life, her role later in the film, and that setup could have come at a later time in the movie, I think, like right before they met, or maybe after Bond puts her on the train. But you've got this great actor in this final Daniel Craig Bond film. You want someone as a villain, you want someone on that level of Le Chiffre or of Raul Silva, where this is the big bad for Bond. And I think while Rami Malek gives a fantastic performance, the role just, it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of it is like, so he's sort of torturing both Madeline and James Bond, and it seems so plot driven because they don't really. I mean, they're right in like it originally. He's revenge, for his family and stuff. But with the nanobots and stuff, he takes on Spectre. First of all, I don't. He joined Spectre or something to take it down, I guess. I didn't quite understand that part.
He had people
did he
working
just-
for him, like
It-
Logan Ash and the scientist whose name escapes me right now.
Yeah,
They were working
okay.
for him for Spectre. Like they were double agents
They were
for
double-
Spectre.
Yeah.
But like that's
So
such an
you got-
unnecessary plot detail, right? Because you could take all of that out and have it be a story, even if you just I still think that the story of him sort of torturing and following Madeline Swan was a little bit overwrought, but you could even make that effective and tie that into Bond as well. But
I mean,
adding in the nano robots and it just felt like a really overcrowded film. When for it's a Bond film, right? You're not going to be focusing on secondary characters. You want to be focusing on Bond, and at the very least, you want to be focusing on Bond through Madeline Swan at this point. Despite what everybody's thoughts on Madeline Swan might be, she's a big part of his life at this point, and so you could use her as the vehicle for pain and emotional value. But I just didn't get that from No Time to Die.
yeah.
Well,
I mean-
with Madeline Swan and Lucifer Safin, I think I pronounced that first name right. Wonder what that's a metaphor for or a reference to. But he says that he's in love with Madeline Swan, and he has been, I guess, since he met her when she was a child. Which grooming? Can we say that? But you could have made the romantic connection. I don't want to say love triangle because I don't feel like that would have worked for Bond in this particular story. But I think you could have made Madeline Swan this MacGuffin, this centerpiece to the film, and had Bond go after Safin for that aspect of his character and not the, oh, I've got these nano robots, I took out Spectre, and I'm gonna wipe out millions of people.
That's the main thing. Is again, it goes back to the villain plan. It's like, yeah, I get why he wants revenge on Madeline, sort of. I don't know why he's so pent up about it after he didn't kill her so many years ago. But then he switches there's a switch that goes off, and he's like, well, I'm really upset at you, but I'm just gonna kill everyone in the entire world. And it's like,
yeah, there's a writing circle.
There's no reason.
Like, here's the thing with Spectre. There was a writing circle that didn't quite get like fully figured out. They decided to have a villain who wanted to get revenge on Spectre and and also Madeline Swan, which I think is a valid idea for a villain.
Yeah.
They also wanted a villain who was using a thing made by MI6 to destroy the world and take over the world like a standard Bond villain. They never quite got them to go together in a way that felt like a natural, fully formed character.
I mean, it was made by M. It was made by an M that we don't care about at this point, right? Like after Judi Dench's M got killed in Skyfall, yeah, Ray Fiennes is a great actor, did a pretty good job as M, but we don't have that same connection that we do to Judi Dench because she was she's carried over from the Pierce Brosnan era.
Yeah.
True. I wouldn't go as far as to say we don't care about him. I think he's solid in the role. But if they were going to if you're gonna have M be involved in the villain's plan, you gotta make sure that that's pushed forward. They have it in a scene. They don't really have it as part of the plot, kind of per se. I mean, like M has no connection with the villain. He's just a guy who happened to steal a thing that he helped make. You know.
I mean, it also ties back to Spectre, where it's clear. Yeah, they get Judi Dench died at the end of Skyfall, and that M died, and they're like, well, we got this new M. We got to make sure they like him a lot. And so they heavily involved him in Spectre. And then there was C too. Both of them were written like complete morons. I mean, these guys are supposed to be. One of them's infiltrating, MI6, and he's been hiding out there, and he's he's a double agent for Spectre. The other guy's supposed to be like the head of MI6, and they're both idiots.
Yeah, and then in No Time to Die, there's the big time jump where we don't get any of that development from M. We don't see sort of how he becomes such a hardened character, where he becomes the cynical Judi Dench that we see in Skyfall. Like, we don't get that. So it makes it's so weird to see.
This is some of the detriments of the continuity. Whereas in the old Bond, when you wanted a new M, you wanted a new James Bond, you don't have to explain anything. I mean, even with Judi Dench carrying over, never explain anything. It's like, oh, Bond, you look different. No, it doesn't matter. It hurts the story more because then you have to write around it. Whereas having them be an idea more than like a written character is a lot more effective for Bond, and always has been. And you let the actors do what they want with Bond. But writing it around all the characters, I mean, writing around Bond is one thing, but it's clear they wanted to tie everything with Bond and write all those characters out too. And then you just have cluttered stories, and you have character development that like doesn't make sense or doesn't lead anywhere. And then you have to do something at the end where it's like, oh, well, we need a proper resolution for all these characters.
I think one of the biggest aspects of what you were just talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong in assuming your train of thought, but having Bond and Madeline at the start of the film right near Vesper Lynd's grave, and it's like, do we really need to send Bond back to where he was at the end of Casino Royale?
They hadn't brought her name in 2 movies.
Exactly.
They're like, oh wait.
Well, she was. There
Vesper,
was
she was
the moment where he looks at the videotape, and it's like, I feel like that was
fine.
If we didn't just have that inspector, then I feel like it would have been an effective moment, him asking for forgiveness. But because we just had an inspector, it kind of feels a bit like, oh God,
we're gonna rehash it.
She's so good.
I think it also suffers like, so I watched Quantum of Solace the other day because I hadn't seen it in a while and I was kind of curious. It's again an M movie, but they do already tread over those lines. Like, again, it's a direct sequel to Casino Royale, and I forget his name.
The guy who
Mathis, I think is his name.
Mathis.
And he's dying, and he's telling Bond like, you gotta forgive Vesper, and it sort of seems like at the end of the movie
he realized
with revenge, he's gotten over it, and then they bring it back again in Spectre, and then they bring it back in No Time to Die, and it's like, I thought that's the thing, is like the arcs don't fit the way that you want them to.
It sort of does, because he writes on the note, forgive me, so it's kind of like one final like, I was wrong, but it's like, haven't we already done that exact thing where he realized he was wrong? But
it's also like Madeline has to like coerce him to go to the grave. It's like, I feel like the progression of him getting over her, he should have just done that himself. He doesn't need the push. And so there's a lot of time there. It's like, I mean, I get it. You want to draw a lot of, attention to Vesper, but he's over her. I mean, that's the whole movie. So I don't know why you spend 15 minutes on it.
I think also one thing I do gotta say, and I've been meaning to say this for a while. I think this isn't the fault of the performance. I don't think it's really, I feel, more of a script thing. But I feel like they were never quite able to get Madeline Swan to feel like this is the character that James Bond is in love with, Like, I mean, the example that the freaking film, sorry for swearing, the film itself was trying.
We're well past that.
Evoke. Yeah, that's true. The film itself is trying to evoke Tracy from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Like, in a singular movie, obviously partially thanks to Diana Riggs being a phenomenal actress, you genuinely feel like James Bond is in love with this woman, and like you could imagine him living the rest of his life with her
Yep.
and all that. Madeline Swan, there wasn't that thing there. Like even Vesper Lynn felt like a character who James Bond was in love with, but Madeline, she wasn't bad or anything like that. But it's like just he could never convince me fully. Like I felt it a little bit more in No Time to Die, but still, I never really felt like this was
But
the woman.
again, the relationship in No Time to Die is complicated by Mathilde, their shared daughter, which is confirmed at the end of the film. That it adds, first and foremost, the decision to bring Madeline back for a second film. Bond girls aren't usually brought back for a second film
because they usually die.
Right.
Yeah.
So bringing Madeline back was one thing. Complicating the relationship with a child, I think it gave more weight, more gravity to how the film ended, with the finality of Bond's last decision in the movie. But at the same time, what do you gain from having that character be here instead of any other Bond girl?
The big problem is like, again, they let her live, right? And yeah, I guess it's a conclusion for Bond and stuff. And again, I think going to Bond's death, I think that is probably Greg kind of forcing them to do that. But
they're not getting me back for another movie.
Exactly.
I mean,
they kind of did a Wrath of Khan, Into Darkness thing, where it's like the Bond girl always dies. And so this time they're like, what if Bond died? And I think it works sort of, but it doesn't work the same way. The reason why a Bond girl dies and it feels weight is because it shows how alone James Bond is. And I guess that's what they're trying to show is like,
well, he was the last one on the island.
Yeah, but it's just sort of, it's kind of sad,
Can I tell you something? Like another thing. Since apparently we can't mention it. Two creators who I enjoy a lot, who talk a lot about James Bond. One overall liked the film. One he ultimately felt he didn't like the film. Both despise the ending. Genuinely hated it with all their being. I feel like I didn't hate James Bond dying, but I agree on principle with them. Like,
yes,
if you're going to have James Bond die, the film didn't quite get there.
It didn't earn it.
I don't know. Yeah, it didn't quite earn it, honestly.
He tried to kill himself like 3 times.
What?
He tried to kill himself like 3 times, essentially. Just going back on the island. It's like, the blast doors. Send the missiles. Send the missiles. I don't know what the rush is. Yeah, there's buyers coming or something, but I don't know that they had this rush. Like the missiles had to be sent right away. I don't think they ever really explained, other than there are buyers coming to buy this stuff. Why? It's sort of a rushed thing. Like they planned to kill him. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like he made a sacrifice. It feels like the script told him to do it, which is a bad thing. When you have a death, it's like Tony Stark. That's the way to do it. You build it up, and also the thing is, Tony Stark's death, because of the continuity, it has a weight. After the movie's over, you feel the void of him in the later movies. Versus with James Bond, it's like, oh, James Bond just died, and you wait and you wait and wait. James Bond will return, and so it's a shitty ending because he doesn't die really. Yeah, sure, he dies in that movie, but you don't really feel like James Bond is.
No, you're just gonna move on to
Craig.
You're gonna move on to Richard Madden or Tom Hardy or Idris Elba or whomever, and the franchise continues. So there's a reason why this hasn't happened in the previous 24 Bond films, is because this franchise keeps going. It will not end.
Can't die. Because then you have problems where it's like, we have to reboot the series again, or or you just decide, well, let's just start off. Let's do it like the old Bonds, and everything's established.
And please give it 5-8 years before we get another Bond.
Yeah, there needs
Like,
to
if
be
you're
some
gonna
breathing room. I
Yeah.
think if they were to do something with James Bond, what I would like to see, I don't know if any of you have read these, but the
GoldenEye
Young
2.
Bond, nope, the Young Bond series by Charlie Higson.
Oh my god.
It basically covers his adolescence, and I think Paramount and MGM could do a really good job finding some good young British actor to come in and do a series, a TV series instead of movies, and
You know they'd
develop
cast
that.
Timothy Chalamet in that role, right?
Eh, uh, that's probably true. But you know what I mean. Is I
want Henry
think that
Cavill.
would be a great way to give us James Bond without giving us James Bond in the
Yeah.
interim.
Or, I mean, again, James Bond is not the only spy you need. If you want to do a series, you don't have to use James Bond. Use any of the 007, or double O agents. They've
Bring
done
back
it
Ana
the
de
other
Armas.
movies. You just take one
I
of them.
He
I
doesn't
want to
even
see
need to
more
be
of
a
that
double
character.
O.
That
then you don't
Bring back
character,
Paloma.
that.
She was sick.
that
Fantastic.
character was so fun.
Mhm.
You know, there was a lot there with Ana de Armas's performance in that role.
Mhm.
And not only would I love to see that spread out over, its own movie, if we were to see another, MGM
I
spy
just
movie, but that character was on the screen for 5 minutes
Mm.
in a 2-hour, 45-minute movie.
I did have a problem with one of the scenes she was in though, where they're
Oh, yeah.
doing the gunfight. They come inside and they're like pouring alcohol. It was like a commercial. It's like, oh, you got to drink whatever this alcohol is. It felt like the Heineken and the Spectre. It's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Well,
Just
I mean, I
tell me,
think
it's
part of
just
that was the writing.
Yeah.
It was they brought in Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who wrote Fleabag and created Fleabag. And I think something that I heard in one of Daniel Craig's interviews was that she brought this kind of spunk and spark that was a little bit. I remember leaving the theater and saying that the film felt a little bit gimmicky and that there were too many quips. Sort of
that
exactly like what
undercut-
you just said.
It's
It
not
undercut a
problem.
lot of the grittier action.
Yeah.
With,
Yeah,
oh, here's
it
a
did.
one-liner.
Dark thing.
Also,
And
it was a
they have
weird
this
one-liner too.
Yeah, they just have these random scenes. It's like they got, Marvel humor and they're just like, oh, put that in there, put that in there. But then
Hello,
the rest
Q,
of them,
I've
like,
missed
oh,
you. Like, that
Yeah.
line didn't need to be said.
That wasn't even the worst one, though. I think the worst one was when they stopped in the middle of a gunfight to take a shot.
Yeah,
Like,
that
why would
was-
you do
It was
that?
awesome.
That was
Come on,
totally
it was
just a
awesome.
nightmare. It's like he's fighting for his love. There's this child, and it's like, oh, let's have a glass. Yeah.
Cheers.
Tonally, I think there's just problems in some of the Craig films, especially the last two, where they have tonal issues where it's like part of it is supposed to be really, really dark. And you just have random moments of levity in between, but it doesn't feel right. It's gimmicky and it does undercut like some of the gravitas that's supposed to be there.
In a way,
Especially following
it
up
shows,
after Skyfall, I think.
Yeah.
it shows a limit of, unfortunately, as phenomenal as Casino Royale is as a film. Love it, fantastic film. It was intended as somewhat of a gritty reboot, not gritty reboot,
Yeah.
a little bit of a gritty reboot of James Bond. It was like, oh, we're being serious and all of that.
Well,
Very
that's
good.
that's something
Batman
that
Begins era.
that's something
It's not
that
bad.
MGM and Eon Productions have commented on, that after, and I didn't expect this to come up twice in one episode, but after Austin Powers, they couldn't play, the joking Bond anymore. The spy comedy had been done. And so you come back with James Bond 4 years after, Pierce Brosnan leaves the role, and Daniel Craig, I mean, this was earlier in his career, but he can lean into the grittiness and the darker sort of edginess of the character. And I think, while you couldn't have necessarily the comedic elements that I'm told have been in other Bond films, again, I'm working on it. I think the humor of the Craig era undercut the tone for this iteration of the character.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a
I mean, it
weird-
was coming off the heels in 2006 of,
Batman Begins.
Batman Begins.
Or Jason Bourne also.
Jason Bourne. You know, they have proof that gritty action movies like this, gritty spy movies, work.
Mhm.
And they're also taking a big risk by getting somebody like Daniel Craig, who's like 5'10", blonde hair, blue eyes.
Blonde hair was
who-
genuinely a controversy. in
Yeah.
2006.
People hated that.
Yeah.
They did not want to see, and so I feel like they kind of had to lean into some things that were a little bit out there for James Bond, and that the risk that they took by making this a gritty reboot throughout 5 movies
Mm.
overall, I would argue paid off. But that they just tried to shove too much history of James Bond down our throats in the final 2 films, especially with the joking, the underdeveloped villains, and just a little bit of the previous films. Like, they brought back the old design of M's office, and there's tons of stuff in these newer films that are callbacks to earlier Bond films, which
The
some of
desk
them
is
work, some
definitely
of
the
them
same
don't.
size.
Like in a way, like to build on that, it's like Hollywood kind of, or Hollywood movie making in general kind of got over its gritty reboot phase. I apologize for that. And thus it's sort of left when it's trying to, it's like, okay, we can do levity again, but it's kind of it's a bit difficult to sort of fit it all in the mix once again, as we we're talking about, because it was on such a hard foundation, kind of. I mean, I still
it's a
like
type of humor too. Like in Casino Royale, they had some jokes in there. They had plenty
Yeah.
of jokes, but they were gritty jokes. You know, he's being tortured, and
Yeah.
the chief was like hitting his balls, and he's like, "Now everyone's gonna know that you scratched my balls." So they have these jokes in there, but you also get like a level. You know, he's sort of crying because he knows, like, you know, the love of his life is, like, you know, being tortured and stuff.
Plus,
And
it hurts.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, plus it hurts
a little bit.
a lot.
Do you guys think that the way that the last 2, because we can all agree Skyfall is excellent. It is freaking great, man. But we can agree that Skyfall is top tier. But with the last 2 films, do you think that in the writing process and in the execution of the films, do you think the studio appeal of these Marvel style action with comedy played into the development of these 2 Bond films?
I don't
Yes.
I don't think the
think
comedy
about-
did, but I think the continuity idea did.
I think
Yeah, I
both.
was going to add that too, Declan.
I was gonna point out it feels very much like Justice League, the one that the studios released, compared to Zack Snyder's Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League, completely dark, completely gritty. There's very, very few jokes. And you know, the Warner Brothers, whatever they released, whatever the hell that was. There's random moments where it's like dark and stuff, and then it's just like not even Marvel humor. It's just like stupid humor. It doesn't fit the tone at all, and it's just stuck in there.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it fits. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's just there, and that's bad to have as humor.
Yeah, and I think to Declan's point on continuity, it might have been part of the writing where they thought, okay, James Bond just went through Skyfall and the events of Skyfall, and you know, now we're going to introduce him to Madeline Swan and Spectre, and that throughout that progression, it's sort of like they're trying to get us to believe that there's that character development and that there's like a change in who James Bond is into this more carefree and lighthearted character, which I think if they'd done a better job, I would probably buy, but they didn't do the job that I think they needed to. And I didn't end up buying into the belief that he's a different character. I still firmly believe that he's the character from Casino Royale, from Skyfall, right? Like those are three gritty films to kick off the franchise. Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall. Those are three big films that have a lot of emotional weight, a lot of big explosions and violence, and that's bound to take a toll on a person, even 007. And I don't think it got shown. That toll didn't get shown in the last two movies.
Final
Yeah.
thoughts on No Time to Die?
No Time to Die in some ways represents the best and the worst of the Daniel Craig era. I think it has phenomenal action and really, and in some areas, really inspired ideas. Well, like both, we didn't talk about her much, but I think Naomi, the first black female 007, was actually, I liked her addition. I thought she was an interesting new character for MI6. I hope an equivalent character, or even her herself, returns in future James Bond films. I feel like she's a fun person for James Bond to play against, kind of. And of course, Ana de Armas's character, phenomenal. But so like some of the best and also good action, genuinely good action. In the worst, it's the storyline that isn't quite there, and a trying to connect it to other films in a way that weakens its story, trying to make the entire series 5 connected films, and thus killing James Bond when it doesn't really earn its death of James Bond, you know. So it's like it's in the middle of the Bond series, in the Craig Bond films for me, because it is both some of the best and some of the worst of the Craig eras.
Yeah.
And for better or for worse, it's probably good that this one is most certainly Craig's last James Bond film.
I think it's for me, the whole thing is just, it's torn between making a proper conclusion to Daniel Craig's James Bond, and also being a James Bond film. They write so much around his character and around all the other characters that they forget some of the key elements of James Bond film. I mean, I don't like when he gets gadgets and stuff, he gets like a watch or something. It's not what you normally expect from James Bond. Not really much. It's missing some of the fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It feels too much like a downer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, yeah, you want it to be gritty, but you need it to be fun. It's supposed to be an escape to have fun. You're not supposed to come out of the movie like, oh man, that's so depressing, you know? That's not what it should be. You got to have both of those things. If you want to make it critically, you got to at least bring it back a little bit if you want to have that, you know, fun James Bond style. But you can't do both of them because they conflict.
Max, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm not gonna add too much more that hasn't already been said. I think that overall the Daniel Craig Bond films did a great job of reintroducing a character to new generations after the Pierce Brosnan era, which were not as well received. And
we do not talk badly about Pierce on this podcast, Max.
Great Bond, some really bad films.
Amen.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
He was in Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia 2.
To be fair, similar with Daniel Craig, he's a fantastic Bond, but had some bad movies at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's great.
I apologize for interrupting, though.
No. I think that's all I have to add, is that it was overall a great experience. Daniel Craig was how I started my Bond experience. And then, like George, I went back to the beginning and started with Connery and worked my way up through the different eras of Bond. And I'm excited to see who's next. Hopefully it's somebody young. I want somebody young. As much as I like Idris Elba,
yeah,
I'd love to see a young actor be able to do this for 15, 20 years and make a bunch of films.
Yeah, if you choose Idris Elba, He's there for like max 2 movies, maybe, because then he's 60.
Yeah, I mean Daniel Craig is 55,
Yeah.
something like that, 52. Yeah, so I mean it was time for him to go. And I think even if he didn't die in this film, it would have been his last one. But this definitely closes the book.
I think he wanted to be out like a few movies ago, and by the time this one came out, kill me. I'm never coming back. Do not leave me alive at the end of this.
Yeah. Again, my Bond fandom is 7 days old.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Maybe 8 days. I think I started it last Wednesday with Casino Royale.
Mhm.
That aside, I digress. I think the performances here, strictly looking at the acting, what we saw from the characters on the screen was very strong in No Time to Die. I think Rami Malek was outstanding as a villain, underwritten as a character. I think what we saw from Ralph Fiennes and Ben Whishaw and the MI6 of it all, Naomi Harris, and even the introduction of Lashana Lynch as the new 007. I think all of those characters were really strongly written. Again, Jeffrey Wright brought back as Felix Leiter. Great performance, and that death scene it tore me apart. Because I love Jeffrey Wright. I've seen a lot of what he's done, and we should probably rank his movies at some point. Just so I can talk that out. But the performances lead the way here. I think for a 2-hour 43-minute movie, it didn't feel like a 2-hour 43-minute movie. I thought it was paced really well. The editing was not as strong as Skyfall. Few films are edited that well. I thought there were some decisions that I would have made differently in the execution of the editing. Hans Zimmer with a fantastic score. And as a story, we've touched on it a lot tonight. There are better Bond films. There are worse Bond films. Like Declan, this is third in my list of the Craig era. I would put Skyfall and Casino Royale above it, Spectre and Quantum of Solace below it. That's just me. But I thought tying everything together, while not necessarily the best story decision, helped make this less of a Bond film, like you were saying, Ben, and more of a tribute to Daniel Craig's Bond. And I think as a send-off for this version of the character, it served its purpose, even if it wasn't the best Bond movie. That said,
can I add one very quick, very brief postscript?
Sure, Declan.
I'm asking our viewer, thank you, viewer, if any of you have played the video game series, let me know if you agree. Did anyone else feel like the final climax was strikingly similar to the video game Metal Gear Solid? Just if anyone else agrees with me on this, please let me know. Anyway,
let us know in the comments below.
The original or which one?
The original Metal Gear Solid. I'm specifically Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PS1.
Okay. So let's rank some Daniel Craig movies. I've been looking forward to this one since we talked about this like 3 weeks ago. I guess I'll go first because I just said that. Number 3 is one that Max guessed right away would be in my top 3 when I said it was one of his lesser known roles. Logan Lucky.
Oh yeah.
2017 Steven Soderbergh heist comedy with Adam Driver and Channing Tatum. I think he had a lot of fun with his role as Joe Bang.
Yeah.
And that it was nice to see that side of him. Knowing, I hadn't seen any Bond films yet, but knowing that he was known for these, darker action films, seeing him in, a somewhat action role, having this amount of fun, again, with a great cast and great direction. So Logan Lucky, It's number 3 for me. Number 2, Skyfall. You got to have a Bond film on the list. And Skyfall is his best as Bond, in my opinion. The story, the performance, his work as the character is strong across the board in the 5 films, but in my opinion, it is strongest in Skyfall. So Logan Lucky, Skyfall, number 1. It's one of my all-time favorite movies, Knives Out. I have a feeling, given Declan's reaction, it's going to be on his list too. But Benoit Blanc is just an iconic character. He's done 1 film. He's coming back for 2 more at least. Rian Johnson is a brilliant writer, brilliant director. Looper aside. And
Looper's all right. I think you mean The Last Jedi aside.
Hey, now.
we'll agree to disagree on that, Ben. But Knives Out, you can tell how much fun he's having in that role. You know, he gets to branch out from his British accent with the Southern drawl. And I think getting to perform a script that strong, with direction that strong, in a cast that strong, must have been the experience of a lifetime. And the fact that he gets to do it again.
And
Knives Out,
arguably an even stronger cast.
arguably, yeah. Knives Out is to me the top Daniel Craig film. Max, you go next.
Sorry, I just realized Ana de Armas was in that too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
He was.
it was
the first
really
one.
fun
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
the dynamic of that one versus this one.
Yeah, I
Considering
didn't even think about that.
I watched Knives Out
me
the night
realizing
before.
Death was in Casino Royale.
The night before I watched No Time to Die, I watched Knives Out. So it was fun seeing their dynamic in that film. And then like 16, 18 hours later seeing No Time to Die. And it's like, oh, that's a very different relationship. All right, Max, over to you.
Okay. Number 3, the girl with the dragon tattoo. He has a great role in that. And I haven't seen it in a while, and I need to go back and watch that. But I just remember watching Daniel Craig in that film and being like, okay, this guy he's more than just James Bond. Number 2 is Skyfall. No, sorry. Number 2 is Knives Out. And for the same reasons that George laid out, I'm basically flipping my number 1 and number 2 with George's, but I'm looking forward to Knives Out 2, Knives Out 3, and however many more they decide to make. I think it's no coincidence that 2 of his best roles are Logan Lucky and Knives Out, where he gets to play with a great Southern accent. And I just think that's funny that those are 2 great roles for him. And then number 1 for me is Skyfall. Skyfall is one of my favorite movies. It's my favorite Bond film, and I just love how personal it is, and I like how vulnerable Daniel Craig plays James Bond in that film. I think it's really different than what you'd expect from not only James Bond, but from Daniel Craig.
You want to toss it to the next person?
Sure. Ben, go ahead.
All right. I guess. You know, I might do 2 Bonds. I think third will be Skyfall for me.
Okay. No Time to Die is going to be in your top 3. I guarantee it.
Yeah, definitely No Time. You know, Skyfall brings a little bit of it's James Bond and Daniel Craig. He sort of starts out the movie a little more callous, and then as the movie goes on, he gets a little bit more emotional, and it's sort of a difference from Casino Royale, where he starts out. He's not really emotional, but he's inexperienced, and he doesn't know how to deal with like emotions. Like he does fall in love essentially, and it like is really complicated for him because he's got all these clandestine operations. He doesn't know who to trust. I mean, at the end of the film, it really breaks him. And you get to see sort of like how that more sociopathic, James Bond comes out. So I'd say Skyfall 3, since I sort of did Casino Royale and Skyfall. Casino Royale is number 2 for me. They're both equally good in my opinion, but Casino Royale is the first one I saw of him. So it's like, it was a really unique way to do Bond. Although he did take some of like the darkness comes from Timothy Dalton, that I think is a very underrated Bond. Christopher Lee said it was the most accurate to the books. He knows what he's talking about because he's the guy that James Bond was based off of. If you guys didn't know that, he's Ian Fleming's cousin. Big actual real like James Bond before he became an actor.
Oh yes.
Really, really cool guy. And then number 1 for me, Knives Out. Like you guys said, it's a phenomenal movie, and he's just like a part of it. I mean, he's phenomenal. Everyone in the movie is phenomenal. Chris Evans is phenomenal. Anna de Armas is phenomenal. All the little, I forget, what's his name? Don Johnson's in there. Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, there's so many great actors.
Michael Shannon.
Yeah, Michael Shannon.
All of them.
Lakeith Stanfield.
What's his name? Christopher Plummer.
R.I.P.
Movie. I mean, yeah. Great movie. Great performance by him, and he did a phenomenal accent from being a British guy. Just a phenomenal accent in general, but it's especially impressive because of that. Declan, you can round us out.
Take us home.
Okay, I'm just gonna get it out of the way quickly. You know what? I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be.
He's gonna rank his top 5, isn't he?
To how it is. So I'm gonna start off with number 3. I mean, this is a little bit of, I knew this wouldn't get picked, so I was trying to throw it in there to talk about it. The Adventures of Tintin, where he plays the bad guy. I think Daniel Craig is Daniel Craig plays the villainous character quite well. He both feels like Daniel Craig, but also feels like straight from a Tintin comic. A fantastic use of motion capture. I feel I really like him in that film. Adventures of Tintin is great. We are a pro Tintin podcast. Anyone who isn't is officially banned. I'm just kidding. Anyway, number 2, I almost hate doing this because it's so freaking obvious. I'm of course putting in a kid in Arthur's Court. No, a Knives Out. Like, duh. It's perfect. It's a freaking perfect film. It was shot near my house, which makes me way too excited whenever I see things that are near my house in the movie. Phenomenal. Love that film. Number 1, I was thinking about it, and I think when talking about the best Daniel Craig films, I think I'm going to go with Casino Royale as number 1. Skyfall, they're both like neck and neck for me because I love them both, but they're both different. Skyfall, I would say, is more spread out in terms of greatness. Casino Royale, I feel like Daniel Craig, even though he's, again, surrounded by phenomenal actors, he's carrying it a lot more. He had to prove himself that he could be James Bond and that this new vision of the character could work. And partially thanks to great supporting actors, but a lot thanks to him, I think he nailed it. And so even though I think I might like Skyfall as a film more by millimeters, I think Casino Royale is my favorite Daniel Craig performance. It threaded the needle and created a new version of James Bond that stands with the greats. That's my take.
All right. You have all heard our picks. We want to know if you agree, disagree, what you think of Declan's choice of Tintin. So
No Time to Die.
We definitely want to know what you guys think of No Time to Die. Yes, exactly, Ben. That's gonna do it for this episode. I think we summed up our feelings on James Bond and Daniel Craig pretty well here, in my opinion. So we will be back next week. We're going to talk Dune. We're going to preview Eternals. We'll have another ranking for you. Until next week. Have a good one, you
All right.
guys. Enjoy the Halloween weekend.
Mm.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.